Welcome back, my family. Before we jump into today's horror stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Your comments and likes really help YouTube push our video and show you even more stories. I'd also love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Drop your answers and suggestions in the comments, and who knows, I might give you a shout out in the next video. Thank you for being here and for all your amazing support. When I was 18, I was living in a small town. Not much going on there, but enough that you could find your usual cast of characters if you looked in the right or wrong places. I hung around with this loose group of ratty skaters, kind of kids who knew everyone, and through them, I got connected with this cat named Max. Max was 29 at the time. He was older than the group, definitely odd, but he sold weed and he gave me good deals. That combined with the fact that he lived nearby made it all pretty convenient. I wasn't really driving yet, so it saved me the hassle of having to bum rides or take the bus to find my greenery. From a jump, Max gave off a weird vibe. Not necessarily threatening, just off. Like the kind of weird that makes you second-guess someone, even if they're smiling in your face. Still, I didn't mind weird. I actually liked people who were a little strange. Made things interesting. Our interactions were always short, 10 minutes tops. I'd stop by, make my purchase, maybe smoke a bowl if the vibe wasn't too strange, and then leave. He'd always offer to drop weed off at my house, but I would always say no. I didn't want this guy knowing where I lived. It felt like crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I wasn't scared of him at that point, but I wasn't naive either. I knew there was something about him that made me feel weird, and I didn't want that anywhere near where I slept at night. Fast forward to May of 2018. Some of the same skater friends invited me to a bonfire. I didn't know Max would be there, but it wasn't a big deal. I wasn't going for him. I brought the guy I was dating at the time, said hellos to everyone, including Max, and we stayed and had a good time for a few hours. Some of the guys played guitar. People passed around beers. It was pretty mellow, but as we were getting ready to leave, probably no later than 11 p.m., I saw Max starting to unravel. He was angry about something, pacing and muttering to himself. And out of nowhere, he threw his guitar straight into the fire. He didn't just toss it in. He actually hurled that thing. Everyone just kind of froze, and I had no idea what triggered it. But I wasn't going to stick around to find out. I left with the guy that I came with, and I didn't give it another thought. That night, I went to sleep like any other evening. But when I woke up the next morning, my phone had exploded. From 1 to 5 a.m., Max had sent me a continuous stream of texts, paragraphs on paragraphs filled with rants, accusations, declarations. It truly seemed like he had gone through an emotional meltdown only captured in real time. He said things like, "You know how much I loved you," followed by, "You're a cruel cunt." Then he'd swing the other way. "I would give you the world if you'd let me," only to immediately say, "You really do deserve him, though." The messages got darker, much more intense. "You're a predator and should be snuffed out. Just wait. You're stuck. I'll either love you or hate you to the fullest extent of my powers. Right now, I pray the worst death on you and that boy." Then perhaps the most disturbing line of them all. "Losing you is like losing a mother to me." Mind you, Max had never once expressed any romantic interest in me. He never asked me out, never hinted at anything like that. We had strictly short transactional interactions. I was barely 18 at this point, and this man was nearly 30. This all came out of nowhere, and I'd be lying if I said that it didn't scare the hell out of me. In one of his final texts that night, he told me that if I said I never loved him, he would leave me alone forever. So, I texted him back that morning and I said, "I never loved you. Do not message me again." And just like that, he went silent. Or at least that's how it seemed. The next night, Max posted pictures on Facebook of himself, naked, curled in a fetal position, his long hair now chopped off, calling himself a statue of shame. He was now spiraling publicly, and it was clear to everyone who saw it that something inside of him had snapped. But I never expected to be the one that he latched onto. About a week later, I got another message from Max late at night. He asked if I had seen the flowers he left along my sidewalk. Said that he'd stolen every flower in the vicinity of my neighborhood that night just to scatter them outside my home. I was immediately on edge. I texted back asking how he knew where I lived. But I also told him I hadn't seen any flowers, so he probably had the wrong house. I reminded him then that I never had feelings for him and that this kind of behavior needed to stop. He said that he'd heard I lived on the same block as another skater guy in our group, which was true. That guy lived on the other side of the block, and I rarely even walked that way. So maybe he really did leave flowers, and I just hadn't seen them. This interaction caused me to block his number again. But a few weeks later, I woke up after a rough night. And that's when I found them. Flowers scattered all around my property. Tons of them lined the sidewalk up the walkway, sitting like some kind of demented offering. This time I was actually pissed. I still wasn't scared, just angry that he was still inserting himself into my life. So, stupidly, I unblocked his number and texted him, "Why the fuck are there flowers outside of my house?" I still feel dumb about this because all it served to do was confirm to him that he'd gotten the right place this time. He replied with, sounds nice. I cursed him out, then blocked the number yet again. A week later, while I was out of town, my roommate sent me a photo. Someone had apparently drawn a heart with a peace sign inside of it, along with my name written beneath it in sidewalk chalk right out in front of our house. That was the last straw. While I got back into town, I went straight to the courthouse to start the process of getting a stalking order. Then, still filled with unchecked emotion, I drove straight to Max's job. I walked in and told him he needed to stop harassing me, that this was stalking. He just stared at me, blank-faced, and said, "If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the cops." I snapped back, "Call the cops. I was just talking to them about you," before I stormed out. Not long after that, I picked up a used car, so I started driving again. One day, I passed him on the road. I hoped that he wouldn't, but he noticed me. The next morning, I woke up to find my car covered in flower petals. This was endless. I presented everything I had to the judge, including screenshots, photos, even his own statements. The stalking order was granted. He was served by police, and for the first time I thought maybe this nightmare was over. But that wasn't the case at all. Even after the order, he kept at it. More chalk drawings, bizarre gifts left for me in front of the house, like a beheaded My Little Pony head glued on top of a beer bottle. I took everything to the police, but they told me unless I caught him in the act or got him on camera, there wasn't anything they could do. So I bought a security camera. Turns out, though, it was a piece of crap. I couldn't scrub through footage easily. I had to manually skip second by second, and it turned out to be pretty useless. I was now exhausted, afraid to even leave my house, closing curtains before dark, and I didn't exactly feel like a person anymore. I felt like prey. Eventually, out of desperation, I unblocked his number again. I figured if he texted me, he'd be violating the stalking order, and that would be enough. After a few days, it worked. He messaged me. It said, "Forgive me. We're charming. This is harming. Let's try again." I took that text to the authorities, and by September of 2018, he was finally arrested. He was facing up to a year in jail and had to stay locked up until our court date. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I could walk outside at night. I could go places without worrying that I was going to run into him. I felt like I was starting to get my life back. But that feeling of freedom, that didn't last. After just 3 months, someone posted his bail and he was released. We had more court dates ahead, and I hoped that they'd lock him up again. But his lawyer kept pushing the dates back, gathering evidence supposedly. After about 6 months of delays, the state decided to close the case. Said he wasn't a threat anymore. By this point, I had already moved 3 hours away. New town, fresh start. For the most part, things have been peaceful. I feel safe. And it's been over a year since the case has been closed. But just last month, he started popping up again, messaging my friends on Instagram, people who live here in my new town, saying how fond he is of me. I've had him blocked for ages, but my profile on IG wasn't private. And I can only think that that's how he must have found them. It shook me, but I locked down my account, warned my friends, and promised myself something. I wasn't going to live in fear again. He doesn't know where I live, doesn't know where I work, and he never will. But the truth is, this whole experience has changed me forever. I'm now much more aware. I try to keep my guard up. I still close curtains earlier than I should. Not because I think he's coming, but because I know people like him exist. He stole a year of my life, and I'll always wish that he'd spent that year in jail instead of me spending it in fear. A quick announcement here. If you're still here and enjoying these stories but haven't subscribed yet, please take a second to do so. Drop a comment too. It really helps push the video out to more people. Your support means everything, and it truly makes my day. This happened to me more than 15 years ago now, but I still remember it vividly. It's not just the event itself, it's the way that it made me feel. The weight that I can still recall on my chest, and the absolute certainty that I wasn't alone. Then, add in the gut punch the next morning when everything became terrifyingly real. It was late December in a small town in Texas. We don't get snow all that often, but that day had dumped about 5 inches across our yard. Everything was blanketed in white, and by the time the sun went down, the whole neighborhood was completely quiet, almost like the snow had muffled all the noise that would otherwise come from it. I can't recall the exact time, only that it was fully dark out. I was a kid, maybe 9 or 10 at the most, playing in my room like usual. But my room was a little bit different than any of my friends. It wasn't just a bedroom. It was actually 2 rooms connected together, a front mudroom with a door that led straight outside, and then my actual bedroom behind it. The outside door was an old wooden one, solid and heavy with original hardware, and a single window on the top half. The window had a shade, but let's be honest, those thin old window shades don't do much. Anyone standing outside could easily peer in if they really wanted to. My parents' room was at the very back of the house, so I was up front by myself. That wasn't odd. It was actually pretty normal. I'd be in my room messing around with my Hot Wheels or some toys, and they'd be off doing their own thing. That night, I think they were taking a shower together in their bathroom way on the other side of the house. I was sitting on the floor in the mudroom, organizing a bunch of cars into racing teams or something like that, all when I got this strange feeling. You know, that prickly sensation that crawls up the back of your neck, like your body knows something's wrong before your brain does? I paused and looked up at the door. More specifically, I looked at the little gaps at the edges of the window shade, looking for anything out of the norm. I couldn't see anything though, just darkness. But I kept staring, trying to make out a shape or movement, anything that could possibly explain the unease. After a minute or two, I convinced myself it was nothing and went back to my playing. Well, maybe 5 minutes later, that same feeling swept over me again, only this time much, much stronger. Only instead of checking the door again, I turned my back to it. I remember telling myself, "You're just being a scaredy cat. It's in your head." I didn't want to look. I just wanted the feeling to go away. And that's when I heard it, the soft metallic sound of the doorknob being touched, almost like someone had just laid their hand on it. I froze completely. My back was still to the door, but I didn't need to see anything to know exactly what was happening. I held my breath, listening, and sure enough, the knob started to move. It was slow and deliberate at first. Someone was seemingly testing it, twisting it just a bit to see if it was locked. And I still couldn't move. I don't mean I was too scared to move. I mean my body literally wouldn't let me. My limbs felt like they weighed 100 pounds each. My chest tightened so badly that it felt like someone had parked a car on it. I just sat there, back to the door, utterly paralyzed. All the lights were off in the house, except for mine. From outside, you could clearly see that the only room lit up was the one I was in, and whoever was on the other side of that door knew it. Then the knob turned harder. Not gently this time, way more force, like someone had figured out the lock might be weak. I should explain now. This door didn't have a modern lock. It was one of those that required a skeleton key, meaning the knob itself could turn freely unless you locked the separate deadbolts. Thankfully, we had two installed, one at the top, one at the bottom. But whoever was outside, they didn't know that. The moment the knob turned all the way, I bolted up and backed against the wall about 5 feet away from the door. I didn't even remember standing. I just found myself there, glued against the wall, staring at the door in complete silence. Now, then it happened again. The knob began to turn slowly like they were now testing to see if it would open. When the knob made it 360 degrees and the door didn't budge, that's when whoever was started pushing against it. The door shook a little, softly at first, but then came the pounding. Someone kicked the door once, twice, a third time. Each kick rattled the door frame. It was like the sound finally broke whatever spell I was under. I screamed as loud as I possibly could and sprinted to the back of the house, yelling for my parents. They were still in the bathroom when I reached them, soaking wet and confused. I remember yelling something like, "Someone try to get in." They both ran up to the front with me, but they didn't even bother to look outside. They checked the door, wiggled the knob, then looked around inside the mudroom. "It's probably just an animal," my dad said. "Or maybe the wind." "Dad, someone was just kicking it." I remember insisting. They were trying to get in, but neither of my parents were having it. Old house, creaky door, kid with an overactive imagination. That was their verdict. They told me to calm down and to go get into bed. No one even looked out the window. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in bed for hours staring at that doorknob. I remember the way the light from the street lamps made it shimmer slightly in the dark. Every little creak or actual gust of wind outside made me jump. I felt like if I looked away, even for a second, something would rush in. Eventually, though, I must have passed out from the exhaustion because the next thing I remember, I was being shaken awake. This time, my parents weren't skeptical. They were the rattled ones. My mom was sitting on the edge of my bed, gripping my shoulders and asking in a very serious tone, "Why did I think someone tried to break in?" I told them everything that I had told them the night before again, step by step. Only this time, they chose to listen. Once I finished, they took me by the hand and walked me to the front door. My dad didn't say a word. He just pointed at the snow-covered yard. At that point, it was clear as day to see. You could see where someone had walked along the street, cut through a yard, and gone straight to the window of my mudroom. From there, those footprints led directly to the door, the very spot where I'd been playing the night before. There are no prints going elsewhere, no sign that whoever this was had circled the house or knocked on other doors. This person came straight to my door, tried to get in, and then vanished back the way they came. The police showed up later that morning and took a report. They asked all the questions you'd expect, took pictures of the prints, but in the end, nothing came of it. No suspects, no further incidents. Whoever this was walked up to our house, then vanished off into the night and never came back. And while that held true, I never felt safe in that house again. Even now, as an adult, I think back to how helpless I felt. Not just because someone was literally trying to force their way into my room, but because my parents didn't believe me. I was a kid trying to scream that something was wrong, and all I got was a pat on the head and told to go to sleep. If those dead bolts hadn't been there, I don't even want to think about what could have happened. I've lived in many other places since then. I've locked hundreds of doors in my life. But to this day, every time I hear a doorknob rattle or even a creak that sounds like one, my heart instantly skips a beat. Because for one night, there was a stranger standing just inches away from me, separated by nothing but an old wooden door and a couple of metal locks. That's the feeling that I'll never forget. I was actually just looking for a story that I posted a while back, but I think I may have deleted it on accident. By far, this has been one of the scariest moments of my life. And in light of recent events going on, I think that's what caused it to resurface. I lived a pretty sheltered life as a kid. I'm an only child, and as is sometimes the case with only children, I lived an extremely overprotected life. My mom drilled stranger danger in my head since preschool and would always stress the importance of being safe. Never go into a bathroom by yourself. Never get into a stranger's car. Never drink from an open bottle. Always stay within an adult's eyesight. I have to admit that half the time it went in one ear and out the other. As a preteen, I thought I knew it all and just hated the constant nagging. However, I get where she was coming from now. My mom was a recent widow and was adjusting to the role of both mom and dad, trying her best to shield me from the horrors that I'm only now beginning to see. We lived in an area that used to be a quaint little dairy town, but over the years had gone downhill and became crime-ridden. The dairy farm fell out of business, and in its place they constructed new homes. It wasn't a bad place to live, but it wasn't the best either. I grew up thinking it was a common occurrence to hear helicopters fly by announcing that they were looking for someone. The cross street from my house led to a park that was known for gang activity, where almost every weekend someone would either be found dead or beat up. But it was okay because we didn't live on that end of the street. We knew most of the neighbors, and if we didn't know them by name, at least knew what they looked like. Despite it not being the best neighborhood, it was pretty quiet and we felt safe. By the time I was in 7th grade, I finally had gotten some freedoms. My best friend, Tiffany, and I would take turns spending the night at each other's houses, but most of the time she would come to mine. Tiffany had a little brother that would always pester us, and she liked coming over to my house because we could talk about boys without her little brother trying to eavesdrop. I think my mom preferred it that way, too, because in her head, we were just more safe at our house. She would even sometimes go on our daily walks and leave us home by ourselves for about an hour or so, which we absolutely loved. I'm not sure what we happened to do on this particular day. We probably ate pizza, sat on my front porch outside as the sun set, and listened to the radio at way too high of a volume. Perhaps this was even one of those nights my mom left us home alone for a while. I wish I could say I saw something out of the ordinary or felt uneasy, but I didn't. After it got dark that night, we retreated to my room. My room has 2 windows, one that faces the backyard and the other that faces the street. I like natural light as much as possible. So, as usual, the blinds were still open from the day, even though it was now dark outside, which meant people could see in, but we couldn't see out. I still left them open. I think I was too lazy to climb onto my bed to close them and had this false sense of security knowing that there was a tall pine tree directly in front of my window. With the tree in front of it, I felt protected, almost as if my room was invisible to the outside world. As the night grew quieter, we decided to build a fort out of sheets and tell each other scary stories. By this time, it was really late and my mom was fast asleep in her room. After the first story or two, I started to grow uneasy and got up to close the blinds. I was creeped out thinking someone could be lurking outside peeking in, but figured it was all in my head because of the stories we were talking about. We got through a couple more classic stories. Think The Hook Killer or La Llorona. And that's when we started talking about true ghost stories, things that relatives claimed they had seen or heard. Our eyes were watery, hearts pounding, muscles clenched when suddenly there was a loud, furious banging on my bedroom window. It wasn't a knock that grew into a series of louder knocks. It was an angry knock from the onset, one that you felt throughout your entire body. My heart was pounding in sync with each subsequent knock. I sat there still, not knowing what to do. My mind frantically tried to make sense of the situation. It just didn't make sense that someone would be knocking on my bedroom window so late at night. We have an iron gate that surrounds our house, and it's pretty loud when you open it. I was surprised that we didn't hear the gate open at all. Even then, the front door is 5 feet from the gate. Why didn't they knock at the door first? My room is all the way in the back and wasn't even the first window with a light on. You would have passed by 2 others before you got to mine. A million questions running through my head, and my brain comes to the only possible conclusion. This is Tiffany's little brother trying to scare us. Yeah, because that really makes sense. A 10-year-old boy walked over to my house in the middle of the night just to scare us. In what felt like ages, but was likely only a matter of seconds, I came to the realization that there was no way it could be her little brother. The knocks only continued. They were loud and angry, yet no one was saying a thing. Both Tiffany and I were frozen in fear. I just wanted to stay hidden in the fort where I knew we couldn't be seen. What if whoever was knocking was peeking in through the cracks in the blinds and watched me as I crawled out from under the sheets? The thought of that made every muscle in my body weak. Then silence. The knocking just stopped. I felt my body ease up a bit. Maybe whoever was out there had left. And right on time, cue a preteen brain. We decided to go investigate. My mom was blissfully unaware of what was going on, still fast asleep at our room, and we weren't going to bother her. We slid out of the fort and tiptoed down the hallway towards the front door. Adrenaline pumped through our body as we decided one of us would sneak to the front door and look out the peephole or window and see if we could see something, anything. Neither of us wanted to be the one to do it, though. But it was my house, so I volunteered. All the doors were locked. Our windows have bars on them. I just had to be as quiet as possible. Beneath every step I took, the wood creaked and groaned. After a few minutes, I finally found myself standing at the front door. My whole torso felt numb. As I inched my face closer to the peephole, holding my breath, I look out, and I suddenly felt both hot and cold at the same time. I didn't know whether to keep looking out or to slink back down. I think a little part of me had convinced myself that the porch would be empty that night. But instead, standing on my porch, I saw an unfamiliar man. I have no idea who this guy was, but he was standing awkwardly close to the door. With everything else that had happened leading me up to this moment, it didn't feel right. What threw me off the most was that he was just pounding on my bedroom window 15 or so minutes ago. And now he was standing at the front door so calmly and quietly. It was as if the roaring avalanche had turned into a falling feather. With my stomach in my throat, I snuck back to the hallway where Tiffany was waiting for me. All I could say was, "There's a man out there." Immediately she says, "Do you think we should tell your mom?" Although it had a question mark at the end, it wasn't a question. It was much closer to a demand. We ran into her room and urgently told her, "Mom, someone's knocking." She must have sensed the urgency in my voice because she sprung right up and told us to stay in her room with the door closed and instructed us not to open the door no matter what happened. We stood behind the door for what seemed like ages, just trying to listen. The front door was too far away, so all we heard was silence. Finally, we heard footsteps coming back towards us. It was so quiet around us that I could hear my own heartbeat pound in my ears. I about had a heart attack when my mom's bedroom door swung open. It was my mom. She told us not to worry about it, that the man that was on our front doorstep was now gone. This left me with a million questions, but she was vague, answering them all. What did he want? Nothing. Who was he? I don't know. She shooed us back to bed, and we complied. The adrenaline had started to wear off, and I was now exhausted. We didn't stay up and speculate or talk. That was that, and it was the end of the story for now. The next day, I was sitting in my room, and I heard my mom talking to someone. I've always been a very quiet kid. Even as a baby, people would often forget I was around. I may be quiet, but that's so I can hear everything. I stopped what I was doing, probably downloading music on Napster or something, and listened up. My mom was telling her friend about the man. Apparently, She opened the door and, through the screen, asked the man if he needed help. The man stammered as if trying to think of a story, and he introduced himself as our neighbor. He said that his mom was sick and he was going around asking for money to help buy her medicine. Concerned, but also trying to poke holes at a story, my mom asked him what her name was, just in case my mom knew her. The guy didn't offer an answer, or he gave a vague one, and then pointed in a general direction saying they lived at that house over there. My mom didn't buy it though. She knew everyone that lived near us, and she had never seen this man before. She probably should have just closed the door at this point and told him she didn't have any money on her, but she didn't want to piss him off. She didn't know if he was armed or dangerous and thought maybe he's just a junkie and will run off if I give him some cash. Luckily, she had fallen asleep in her clothes. So, as she reached in her back pocket, she found a $5 bill change from the pizza we had ordered earlier. She didn't open the screen door to give him the cash, though. Rather, she slid it through the gap at the bottom of the door. But at this point, the man started getting more aggressive and growls. "That's all you have?" Now, my mom is starting to sense something more sinister in this man. He's not just a junkie, or if he is, he's an aggressive one. My mom then lies to him and quickly tells him, "Yeah, that's all I have. We live day to day here, and $5 is actually even more than I should spare, but your mom's sick and I feel bad." Not satisfied by her answer, he continues to demand more cash. My mom realizes that this man is not taking no for an answer and begins to bluff. "I don't have any more cash, but maybe my husband has some on him. I would hate to leave a neighbor in need. Your mom must really need that medicine, Tim." The moment my mom feigns a call to my dad, who hasn't lived with us in years, this man's demeanor changes as he mutters, "No, that's okay," and treks out of there. I don't know what would have happened if the man had called her on her bluff, but thinking a man was present clearly scared the hell out of the guy, at least enough to drive him away and fast. Hearing all of this sent a chill through me, thinking that he probably thought me and Tiffany were home alone. He must have been watching us and was planning on breaking in again. Cue preteen brain. Well, he's gone now. I better go download that Usher album. We never saw that man again. Clearly, he wasn't a neighbor of ours, and he definitely wasn't trying to fundraise for a sick mother. Glad my mom was savvy enough to get him off of our porch. Glad that we were smart enough to wake her up when we did. I have no clue what that man actually wanted, but it most likely wasn't to compliment us on our forward architecture skills. We recently had a pool installed in our backyard, something we've been saving up for and looking forward to for a long time. It was our way of turning the space into something fun and relaxing, especially now that our kids are out of the house and we have more time to enjoy the quiet. But with construction came its fair share of chaos. One thing that got totally wrecked during the dig was our landscape lighting. The crew had to cut through wiring to make room for the pool, and while the final product looks great, it left our yard pitch black at night until we could get the lighting redone. Now, that might not sound like a big deal, but we've got 3 dogs. Every night, they head out to the yard for their final bathroom break before bed. It's usually me who takes them out, bundled up in a coat, standing on the patio, waiting for them to do their thing. There's our older girl, a sweet rescue who's a mix between a lab and a corgi, stocky and protective with a surprisingly deep bark. Then there are our 2 pugs, short and snorty and definitely not brave enough to wander too far from the porch. So, one night about a month ago, the usual routine was playing out. It was a cold and overcast night, one that has no moonlight, just a heavy blackness hanging over everything. Our backyard is long and narrow with old trees lining the back fence. We have a gate set up around the pool that deters the pups, so we didn't have to worry about the dogs getting in trouble there. I stepped out onto the patio, pulling on my boots while the dogs darted ahead of me into the yard. The pugs always meander out a few feet, then wait to be escorted the rest of the way. But our rescue girl, she took off like she was on a mission, not the usual sniff and wander. She was bolting full speed and barking like she meant it. At first, I thought she might be honed in on a skunk or raccoon. We lived close enough to the woods that it wouldn't be surprising, but then I noticed how the pugs had frozen a few feet away, barking nervously, but not daring to follow her. That's when I started to feel the gnawed in my stomach. I called her name once, twice, but she just kept going. The barking turned more aggressive, louder even. And then just like that, it stopped. What followed was an absolutely horrible yelp, high-pitched and obviously pained, followed then by silence. My heart dropped. I scooped up the pugs, now squirming in my arms, and ran awkwardly through the dark, calling for her again and again. When I finally saw her, she was lying on her side near the back tree line, completely still. Just as I reached her, the neighbor's motion sensor light flicked on, casting a strange yellow glow over the fence and giving me my first clear look. My pup wasn't bleeding. There were no bite marks and no obvious wounds. She tried her best to get up, but she clearly struggled at first. After a few more moments of effort, she was able to push herself upright and started limping back towards the house. She was a step slower than normal, but it's clear that she was bellowing to the back door like she knew she needed to get inside. I coaxed her along as we moved, whispering encouragements while glancing nervously over my own shoulder. That motion light had gone off at a very convenient time, and I couldn't shake the thought of what might have triggered it. Once we got back inside, I yelled for my husband and explained everything. We checked her over top to bottom and found nothing. No cuts, no blood, not even sore paws. Whatever had happened out there, it had left no obvious mark. After some considerable thought on the matter, we eventually settled on the theory that it wasn't an animal out there. There had been a person in our yard, likely hiding near the back trees. When the dogs ran out, they startled whoever it was, and our girl likely got too close. Whoever it was must have kicked her hard to get her away and then scrambled over the fence themselves. Well, the next morning, still rattled, we decided to check out the yard a bit more thoroughly. I didn't expect to find anything. It's rare to get any real answers in moments like these, but there were boot prints, not ours. Large, deep ones in the soft soil near the back tree line, and then again closer to the fence. While checking out the second set of prints, I spotted something that made my stomach drop. There was a crushed cigarette butt tucked behind one of our landscaping rocks. Now, neither myself nor my husband smoke. None of our friends do either. And the position of it made it clear that someone had been hanging out there. I'm not sure for how long, but at least long enough to kill an entire cig. What made me the most wasn't that someone had been in her yard. It was the not knowing why. There's nothing back there worth stealing. We don't keep anything valuable outside. So what were they doing? Watching us? Scoping out the house? That night shook me in a way that I didn't expect. Our brave girl thankfully bounced back quickly. No internal injuries, and she's back to her usual self, but I'm not. That feeling of being watched, of someone hiding just outside the edge of your vision, that stuff stays with you. We had the landscape lights fixed within a few days and even added motion sensors of our own. But that same unease, it still lingers. Maybe it was a homeless person or, for whatever reason, a neighborhood teen cutting through our yard. Maybe it actually was someone casing the place. I don't know if I'll ever really know. These days, I pause just a little bit longer before heading to bed at night. I flick the porch light on even when I don't need to. I find myself checking locks more than once, always looking for something that just doesn't feel right. I used to feel comfortable in my own yard. It was just a place the dogs ran through, where our kids used to play, where we'd sit in the summer and watch the sun dip below the trees. But now everything feels different, like a line's been crossed. I don't know who was out there that night. I don't know what they wanted, but I know what it felt like when my dog ran straight towards something she couldn't see and ended up hurt because of it. I know now just how fast that feeling of safety can vanish. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, one where doors were left unlocked, and you came home when the street lights turned on at dusk. After moving away for college, I decided to move back to my quiet, sleepy hometown in one of the two apartment buildings there. I'm living there for roughly 3 months when one night I go to sleep early on a Friday evening. Now, I'm a reasonably hard sleeper, so when I wake up in the middle of the night to noises, I'm usually alarmed. I'm going to describe my apartment layout for a better understanding. As you walk in the front door, the kitchen is to the left, living room to the right. There's a hallway straight ahead with one bedroom at the end. A bathroom is to the left in the hall, and my bedroom to the right. I get up from my bed, walk around the end of it, and peek my head out of the bedroom door. I look to the left to see my front door wide open to the outside hallway. There's a loud voice coming from my now lit-up kitchen. From my vantage point, while I'm able to hear a voice, I'm unable to see into my kitchen. This made me freeze. The fact that I've left out of telling the story, since it's not something I'm very proud of, but I want to relay the story in its entirety. The freeze may have only been for a couple of heartbeats, but to me, it felt like much, much longer. I come to my senses after realizing that I've almost stopped breathing. I take a shallow breath to steady my mind and gather whatever bravery I have. There's no thought process about what to do at this point. I'll let my body and my instincts take over. I turn around and head back to the far side of my bed. I grab my phone from the nightstand and quietly remove it from the charger. Luckily, my bed frame is high enough for me to squeeze under it without much difficulty. The downside, though, I immediately realize that there's no escape from my hiding spot if things turn south. I'll have to rely on luck to get me through this. I dial 911 and a woman answers, asking about my emergency. I briefly explain in a whisper that an unknown man is in my apartment, and that as it stands, I'm currently safe. I lay there listening to the chaos unfolding in my home, reassured by the presence of my cat, Marcy, laying under the bed with me. It seems to me that whoever's in my kitchen is on a phone call based on the one-sided rambling. I tell the operator this fact and explain my fear that he's going to bring other people into my home. He was making enough sound to allow me to give a play-by-play on the call. He starts screaming about killing someone. I'm unsure at this point whether he's talking to the person on the phone or if he knows that I'm there. The voice I hear is unfamiliar, but this does little to ease my terror. He then starts ringing the doorbell in the outside hallway and yelling for me to come out. My blood runs absolutely cold as I realize that he might come try to find me. Marcy is alarmed by the doorbell, and when she creeps out from under the bed, I panic. What if he hurts her? I start whispering as loudly as possible to get her attention without letting him know my location. She senses my unease and crawls back under the bed with me. At this point, I feel like I've been on the phone for an eternity, and I ask the operator how long until the police arrive. She's unsure, but assures me that they are on their way. My town is roughly a 30-minute drive to the nearest city police, but I assumed there's a highway patrol that would be coming soon. Little did I know that safety was in no rush to get to me. I hear him walking around my apartment, and that's when he enters my extra bedroom, which I use as a storage room with a bed in it. He hasn't once stopped yelling. I'm still unaware whether he's on the phone or not. I hear him mention that it must be a kid's room. I shush the operator because he ceased his screaming for the moment. I hear more noises like he's rifling through boxes and throwing things around the room. Then my fear is realized as I hear him quietly enter my room. I see his feet walk to my closet. He starts going through my clothes and emptying my hamper onto the floor. He turns around and walks to my bed before sitting down on it. I'm holding my breath now. I think he lays down at this point since the pressure of the bed lessens on top of me. This man is deathly silent, all while I'm doing all I can to not make a peep. There's shuffling and moving around, and he gets up and walks out of my room. I allow myself to take another shallow breath, and I steady my conviction. He starts making noise again like he's throwing and punching things. I informed the operator that he was just in my bedroom and the police need to hurry. I don't know how long I can keep Marcy under the bed, and I'm concerned about what could happen if he finds me. He walks back into the kids' room quietly. I shush the operator again because she's continually asking me for a play-by-play. I can hear him breathing from the other room. After the quietest few minutes of my life, he yells, "Who's there?" I freeze again, listening for any movement, but there's nothing. I'm starting to get lightheaded from all my shallow breathing. The silence in this place is deafening, and I fear that he's trying to detect me. After a lifetime, I hear footsteps entering my apartment. I hear a man's voice say, "Hey, bud, you're in the wrong house." I've never felt more relief in my life before this night, or since once I realized that that was a cop. I hear my front door close, and I crawl out from under the bed before breaking down. The adrenaline and anxiety take over as soon as the feeling of safety washes over me. That's when a female officer comes around to my side of the bed and puts her hands on my shoulders. I'm trying my best to keep it together, but I'm failing miserably at this point. She let me put clothes on, and I could hear 3 male voices coming from my apartment. The woman left and came back with a handful of clothes, asking if any weren't mine. They all were, and I told her so. She shut the door behind her as she left again. I turned and looked out my window, only to see no lights from the cop car on the street. I look at my phone and realize the call to 911 took 22 minutes. I can't explain the feelings I had at this time, since so many hit me all at once. The door opened again, and the officer motioned for me to exit. Taking a first look at my home was almost as anxiety-inducing as the event itself. My apartment was a complete mess. Clothes were everywhere, mixed with garbage and other belongings from my shelves and counters. The man had removed items that he had intended on taking and placed them outside in the hallway. They tell me they had found him on the floor in the second room, completely naked, holding a bottle of lotion. In his vicinity, there was a winter hat with an unknown substance inside. The officer was kind enough to throw that in a garbage bag immediately. They tell me to look and see if any of the clothes in the apartment don't belong to me. I tell them no. This man had apparently entered my home completely naked and destroyed just about everything in sight. I noticed that the lid of my garbage can was filled with cat poop. It seems that it had been separated from the rest of the bag. The rest of the garbage was littering the outside hallway. They asked me if I'd like to stay at my place or go elsewhere. Thankfully, my parents lived nearby, and I had an officer drive me there. I explained to my parents what just happened, and in the next few days, I have to explain the situation to what felt like half the town. The ridiculousness of the story catches people's attention and becomes a slight joke even. I play along, attempting to be lighthearted, but I'm unable to dissociate from the horror I faced. Now I should feel better knowing that he's in custody, but the events after the break-in do little to comfort me. An officer shows up with a subpoena to appear in court to testify, but I receive a call for postponement. I just want this whole thing to be behind me. After a month, I call the phone number on the paper I received and ask when they're rescheduling since I hadn't heard anything. The woman informs me that they mailed another and I hadn't shown up. I asked where was it sent since I haven't received the summons. She tells me that they sent it to my address, but in the wrong town. I'm unable to comprehend how they couldn't know where I lived. The crime happened there. She tells me that the man pleaded guilty and was given 180 days as a sentence. I was furious. This man would get out of jail in 8 short weeks, including time served for attempting to steal and enter in my home. She reassured me that he also received another 180 days for a previous bench warrant he had. After his release, I kept track of his location using the sex offender registry. He had had relations with a child years prior. It makes his statements about the kid's room that much more unsettling. Soon after his release, he was arrested yet again, this time for a 4th DUI and he was sentenced to 5 years with 2 of them suspended. I was happy for a while. My nightmares hadn't ended, but the tension I felt during my waking hours certainly lessened. It's been 2 years since this happened, and I've since moved 3 times. I don't know if I'll ever be content and happy anywhere, but I'm sincerely hoping that's not the case. He was released 6 months after his conviction for some reason or another on parole. He immediately disappeared and fled from his parole officer and the sex offender registry. I'm currently planning a cross-country move to try to rest my mind. I'm hoping to someday grow out of my nightmares. Although that's much easier said than done when you're faced with the memory that a naked and unstable criminal broke into your house while you were sleeping and spent 20 minutes looking for you, all while cradling a bottle of lotion. The story I'm about to tell you is one that has seriously and negatively affected me in my life. I'm not sure how this is going to come out, as I've never tried writing or telling this memory before. I'm nearly 37 now, and at the time that this took place, almost half a lifetime ago. I was 18. I'm also female, if that matters. At the time, way back when I was fascinated by sculpting and pottery. I was attending college in the next town along from mine, doing a beauty therapist course that I really ended up having zero interest in. After school, every Tuesday, I had managed to find a pottery class in my town. So, I would catch the bus from college back to town and go to pottery class before then walking home. I was attending this class for maybe 2 months before the guy who would change everything walked in. He arrived on his own and was extremely visibly shy and anxious. Cool, I thought. I myself suffered from anxiety, so I thought we had some common ground already. His name was Francis. Francis would never look you in the eye. He would look sometimes quite wildly from one point to another, just above your head when he was talking to you. And when he was listening, he would stare directly at the floor. He was really intelligent, though, eloquent too. And other than his little quirks, he was really interesting to talk to and had a lot of cool ideas about life. I liked him. He actually filled that classic archetype. Tall, dark, handsome. Long story short, when he told me he was 18, too, I was pretty happy, and we became really good friends really quickly. So, we started hanging out other places beyond pottery class. I even went to his house a few times, met his parents and his sister. His sister was a lot younger than him, but I don't remember how old exactly, maybe 4 or 5. His mom was Polish, but spoke excellent English. His dad reminded me of Carlisle Cullen, and the way he looked at me made me shiver. He had a weird deadness or coldness behind his eyes that would phase in and out, and it looked like pure hatred. By this point, Francis and I had become an item. His parents were delighted and immediately began discussing marriage, and that sort of thing creeped me out. It wasn't even jokey the way they discussed it, like parents might do to embarrass or tease you. They made it sound like I had already entered into some sort of contract. My first real red flag was how intense Francis became only the first 2 days after we became official. He would handwrite me poems ranging from 3 to 6 A4 pages in length. In all honesty, it was some of the best poetry I'd ever read. My favorite being Die for Dreams, which actually turned out to be by E. Cummings, word for word. I thought he was just joking or wanted to impress me, but couldn't write himself. So, I ignored the compulsive lying regarding his poetry. Then the calls and texts started. I would silence my phone in school, and when I checked it at any point in the day, I would have an astonishing number of missed calls, sometimes over 100. No joke, and texts that were so long I couldn't even finish most of them. They were all ramblings of how his love for me surpassed his will to even live, and I was his heir and reason that he would do anything for me. Mind you, this is days into the relationship. I should have been seriously put off, right? But I felt sorry for him. I did what you really shouldn't do, and I ignored my gut instinct. He was pretty isolated apart from his family and me. He had no other friends. I just thought he was attention-starved and eventually he would level out. But this is when things started to spiral out of control. Shortly after a birthday of mine, Francis had settled down with the letters and texts slightly, but it still felt like I got calls every 15 minutes all day and even intermittently throughout the night. Now, bearing in mind, we hadn't had sex or even done anything more than a kiss. At the time, I had a big thing about not feeling ready to go further with him, and that I didn't ignore. But we had sex playfully, and I had sent a couple of explicit pictures. Never do this, ladies. It never ends well. His mom found them. Well, no, to be specific, he showed her them casually. She went bonkers. I checked my phone as I left school one day, and apart from the usual missed calls from Francis, I had 14 from his mother. Weird, I thought, and simply hit redial. She immediately informed me that she had spoken to a lawyer, and she was intent on ruining my life. I could almost hear her spitting as she screamed down the phone, calling me names, and at one point threatening my entire family. I was stumped. This was a massive overreaction to a topless photo or two and some badly done textery talk. I was a little freaked out. This is when she said it, and my stomach dropped. He's 13, you fucking pedophile. I'm going to ruin your life. This entire time up to this point, she had gone along with him being 18, picking out prospective universities, looking for potential housing around campus. But everything was a lie, and her son was 13. He looked, behaved, spoke, and generally checked out like someone my age. And I believe him, of course, because why would someone help their son to lie to someone about all of this? She had twisted a bunch of evidence together out of texts and the pictures. And a picture he had sent me during that day. She was going to go to the police with it. I was over 18 now, and where I live, I would get charged with having indecent images of children and sexual grooming along with God knows what else. But they were clever about it. Almost as if this were something they had planned all along, because I had no evidence in email, text, or witness form of them saying he was above consenting age. And she flat out denied that she had ever said that. She said that she had always told me he was 13 and never agreed to this relationship. Soon after, my friend stopped talking to me. People started staring who knew me locally. I got hate mail all because a rumor went around that I was a child abuser. I ceased any and all contact with Francis and his family, and they eventually had said they wouldn't go to the police, but only because they accidentally deleted the evidence. I was too scared to tell anyone. She was so descriptive about how she would ruin my entire life and reputation, and she would destroy my family's lives as well. I just hoped that it would all go away. I quit college. I couldn't go outside. I was getting death threats. But if I went to the police, I was scared they would think I really was an abuser. I had a mental breakdown owing to the fact that Francis wouldn't stop calling, emailing, turning up, and threatening to kill me and set my house on fire if I didn't come back to him and marry him. He stole $2,000 off his dad using his card to order an engagement ring. He got another girlfriend who was actually just a photo of a model from Thailand who was in her 20s. One who didn't even know Francis. All in order to try to make me jealous. He kept demanding that he was 19, 18, 19 again. He kept sending me videos of really horrific pornography that I didn't even think was legal. He threatened to unal alive himself. He tried everything to get a reaction. He knew I wouldn't go to the police. He made it clear he would tell them. I showed him private things he didn't understand and hadn't really deleted the messages. I never replied to him, though. For months, the stream of emails continued. I had blocked him on every media and phone I could, but I couldn't figure out how he kept finding my email addresses. Later in the year, and unrelated to me, I heard from a girl involved in an altercation with Francis. Apparently, he had held her at knife point after his parents left them to babysit his sister because she wouldn't be intimate with him. She managed to lock herself in the bathroom, and he hacked the door pretty badly with the kitchen knife. His parents got back, but refused to believe the girl before he eventually stabbed his mom in the shoulder in a fit of wild rage. And then, and only then, were the police called and the girl allowed to leave. After this, he was diagnosed as autistic, and he never faced any punishment by the law. Personally, I've never met someone with autism who is anything like Francis, and I do know a lot of people on the autism spectrum, so I'm skeptical about this diagnosis, but I really don't know. As mentioned at the beginning of the post, I'm 37 now, and I haven't heard from him since he stabbed his mom years ago. And all that being said, I'm fine with never having contact with this man ever again. When I was 20, I ended up in the hospital with a bunch of infections thanks to an underlying immunodeficiency. One of the infections was bad enough that it had to be surgically removed. The whole stay was an utter mess. At one point, I was misdiagnosed with AIDS and then later with necrotizing fasciitis. All of this at one of the best hospitals in the U.S., mind you. But the most disturbing part wasn't the misdiagnosis. It was something that happened one night that I still can't fully explain. It was around 3 o'clock in the morning. I wasn't fully asleep because I'd slept most of the day and a light from the hallway kept catching my attention. That's when a nurse came into my room, not my usual nurse. He was a younger guy that I'd seen regularly. This was an older woman, maybe in her late 40s, and I'd never seen her before. She had this cold, distant vibe and didn't say much other than something like, "Time for your medication." She pulled out a syringe, and right away, I noticed it was massive. Definitely not the usual size for my morphine. I was used to getting doses from something like 10 or 20 cubic centimeter syringe. This one was easily 5 times that size. I tried to ask her if she was sure she had the right dose or the right patient, trying to keep it light so I wouldn't come across as difficult. But all she did was ignore me. Eventually, she said, "Just go to sleep. This will all be over soon," before she injected the medication. I laid there trying to convince myself that it was probably fine. Hospitals are weird and chaotic, and I figured maybe it was just a new nurse and a different routine. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off here. I even thought about kinking the 4 to set off an alarm, but I didn't do that. I just tried my best to relax. Then it all started. At first, I felt hot, red hot, like my skin was radiating heat. Yet inside, I felt cold. My whole body tingled with goosebumps. Then slowly, I stopped feeling anything at all. It was like all of my nerves had just disconnected. Then everything turned red. Not literally, but it felt like I was seeing the world through a red-tinted filter. Then everything pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. That's when the distorted hallucinations really set in. I couldn't tell if my eyes were open or shut. I couldn't tell what I was actually seeing and what I was imagining. Eventually, I couldn't even feel the bed beneath me. I felt like I was floating a few inches above it. Somehow, through all of this, I managed to hit the call button. I have no idea how long it took, but nobody came right away. And at that point, I was losing motor control. My arms, hands, legs, they all felt like they weren't mine anymore. I was trapped in my own body, slowly becoming more and more aware that this wasn't just a weird side effect. What I was going through was serious. The scariest part, though, was just how peaceful it all felt. Nothing felt urgent. I wasn't panicking. And as I think back, I don't think I was even capable of panic at that point, even though I clearly should have been. I had to fight just to focus on breathing in and out over and over again. Then finally, after what felt like half an hour, that's when my regular nurse walked in. The second he came through the door, everything snapped for me. It felt like whatever fog I was under got pulled off of me all at once. I sat up suddenly, and without warning, I vomited clear across the room, like full-on projectile. He rushed over, helped clean me up, and stayed with me for a while. I could move again. I could even talk. That's when he told me another nurse had been helping out that night and accidentally gave me the wrong dosage. That was all he said. He didn't explain how it happened or who the nurse even was. And truly, he seemed just as rattled as I was. It wasn't until much later, years really, that I started to think more about it. I was in the terminal ward at the time, and I was by far the youngest person there. Most of the patients there were 50 or 60 years my senior. I'd been semi-conscious for days, clearly in pain and not making much progress. And that particular nurse, I never saw her again. Didn't know her name. Didn't even see her face clearly. Was this just a mistake? A fluke of some sort? Or did someone decide I didn't need to be there anymore? I still don't know. What I do know is that I refused morphine for the rest of my hospital stay, and I haven't touched it or any other strong painkiller since. There are some things you just can't forget, no matter how much time may pass. So, a few years back during my senior year of high school, my stepdad made a very poor decision. This decision has caused a lot of pain and suffering for both my mom and myself, as we're both still in counseling for PTSD as well as anxiety disorders. Just for a little context, my biological parents got divorced when I was 7 years old. I'm also a female, if that matters to anyone. By the time I was in my teens, I was used to seeing each parent dating other people. And I was actually very happy for my mom when she told me she met somebody new. That is until I met him. As soon as I met this guy, we'll call him Don, I had this horrible gut feeling. Don was originally from Florida, and he moved to Kentucky right before he met my mom, leaving behind his wife, who he was in the process of divorcing, as well as a son. He was a weirdo in just about every sense of the word, always trying to start an argument over petty topics or walking around shirtless with his strange nipple rings hanging out, all while my friends were over. Although this guy was weird, he was never threatening or abusive at all towards me or my mother. That held true until one night right before my mom's birthday. I remember that night pretty clearly actually because it was my best friend's birthday and I was waiting for her to come pick me up to go to dinner. My mom and Dawn also had plans to go out that night. They were going to go watch the University of Kentucky versus the University of Florida basketball game. As an only child, my mom has always been very protective of me, so she wanted to wait until I left with my friend before she left with Dawn. This, for whatever reason, really pissed Dawn off, and he stormed out of the house without her. I left shortly after this, and I returned maybe 4 or 5 hours later. The basketball game had been over for quite some time at that point, but Dawn hadn't come home yet. My mom was acting weird and nervous when I asked about him, but instead of stirring anything up, she just ushered me off to sleep. Well, as I was sleeping, I was woken up by my mom screaming my name. Obviously disoriented and groggy, I groped around for my phone, thinking maybe I had overslept and was late for school. When I checked the time, it was near midnight. My mom screamed my name again and told me to shut my door and call 911. This is pretty much when hit the fan. I started freaking out. I jumped up, ran over to my door to slam it and lock it. Just as I did this and began to slink back towards my bed, 3 gunshots flew through my bedroom door, narrowly missing me. I grabbed my phone and jumped to the other side of my bed and laid flat on the ground, hoping to avoid any more bullets that might be coming. I barely had time to get out my address and inform dispatch that there was someone trying to kill me before I heard my mom scream one last time before 2 more gunshots rang out. Everything in the house fell silent, and I had this horrible feeling that someone had just taken my mom's life. I got up from the floor when I heard the person begin to throw themselves against my door in an attempt to break it down. All that was running through my mind was getting to my mom and staying alive. Eventually, he broke my door down, and I was horrified to see that it was my stepdad. His eyes were red and glazed over as he grabbed me by my shirt collar and put the barrel of the gun to my head. I screamed and fought as he said over and over, "Is this what you wanted?" At this point, a lot of the finer details get hazy as I had a ridiculous amount of adrenaline pumping through me. but I somehow managed to back him up and push him down onto my bed. I used both of my hands to hold his hand with the gun away from me, and I tried with all of my might to get it up against his head so I could blow this motherfucker's brains out. We struggled like this for a while until my mom came stumbling in, gunshot wounds to the neck and stomach. She laid across the gun while telling me to run. I hysterically ran out my front door and up the street to my neighbor's house. I'm sure I scared them half to death, but I was able to redial 911 and tell them exactly what was happening. As I was at my neighbor's, my mom was still in my room with my stepdad. She says this is where she became very weak from blood loss. She rolled off of him onto the ground. She asked him why he was doing this, and he simply put the gun into his mouth. She took that opportunity to run out the front door right into the arms of the arriving police officers. In the end, the cops ended up having a standoff with Don as he barricaded himself inside the house. He eventually made the mistake of pointing his gun at them, and they in turn blew half of his dick off, a little bit of small retribution before arresting him. Don is currently serving 45 years in a Kentucky state prison. And to this day, we'll give no reason as to why he decided to do this to us. In all honesty, I don't care what his rationale was. My mom and I lived through it and have grown so much closer because of it. We actually ended up getting matching tattoos that read, "Strength comes from the madness we survive." So, Don, get fucked, and I really hope everyone in prison enjoys both you and your half penis. I had mostly forgotten about this story until someone plugged me into this sub. After thoroughly creeping myself out for a few days, I decided it's time for me to contribute as well. For many years, I spent my summers working in a major southern U.S. city with a moderately high crime rate and some serious racial conflict. Now, I grew up in New York City and live there to this day, and I'm not overly afraid of walking around in some of my city's more infamous areas at night, but I think it's important to respect the city that you're in. And I knew that this southern city was quite a bit more dangerous for me to walk around alone in, especially as a young petite woman. For reference, I'm about 5 feet 0 inches tall, 110 pounds. I'm pretty strong, a lot stronger than people think by looking at me. But I know better than to think I would do too well in a one-on-one fight. To be honest, in my summer city, I wouldn't usually even walk home alone after work since I worked until about 10 p.m., sometimes later, even though it was only a 10-minute walk. It seems silly to ask someone for a ride when it was a lovely and short walk through this gorgeous city. But I also just knew that I didn't feel safe. It wasn't even the caution I've sometimes felt in a crummy neighborhood back home, but just a totally different feeling, a complete inability to confidently be safe. I love my summers there, but I avoided being alone after dark at all costs. But as often happens, we make little compromises. It was midnight this night, and the only other person in the office was staying for another couple of hours while one of the events we were managing wound down. He asked if I wanted him to drive me home, but I knew that this would mean locking the entire building up, driving like 2 minutes, then 2 minutes back, disarming the security system again. I just felt silly to ask like a scared little girl, so I said, "No, I'll be okay. I only live a few blocks away." And I went off on my merry trip. I walked with my head up, stride sure, ears open, just like I do back home. I got 1 block, then another. It was a gorgeous night out, and I let myself enjoy it and relax just a little bit as I hoped in vain for a gentle breeze to cool me off a little, and enjoyed the symphony of the various insects that came out that night. It was ungodly humid, and I didn't see a single other person. Definitely a different type of city than New York, but I could hear the gentle hum of nightlife from the main drag 1 avenue over. I got a 3rd block, and then I finally saw another person, a man. Of course, I thought to myself as my anxiety ratcheted up, and I instantly admonished myself for my bias. After all, I was walking alone at night. Why didn't a man have the same right? But And this has never happened to me before or since. Something about the sight of that man, that specific man, absolutely terrified me. I couldn't put into words why for you. He was in his mid-20s and had long, shaggy hair. As the moonlight reflected off of him, I could see that it was blonde. Everything about him struck me as just sort of an anomaly. He looked like a surfer, not a stalker in my approximation. And at that time of night, he actually looked pretty cute. And yet, I could hardly bear to look at him because looking at him filled me with both fear and apprehension. I know that you can never tell, but it really just struck me how much this guy did not look like the sort of guy who would terrify me. And yet, how absolutely terrified he made me feel for reasons that I couldn't articulate. There was nothing objectively scary about him. And yet, I just felt this sickening dread as we slowly approached each other. It wasn't just that I was alone at night. I don't know to this day what it was, but I knew that he scared me. He was walking towards me, and I had to walk towards him to get home. We got closer, and as we did, he got bigger and bigger, and I just felt smaller and smaller with each step I took. Maybe a minute passed. Soon we were on the same block. I willed myself to just get past him and get it over with. And yet, when I was about 20 feet away from him, I stopped cold again. I don't know why. I just really didn't want to walk past him. It almost felt like I couldn't make myself go even if I wanted. This is ridiculous, I thought to myself. And I even began to blush in the dark summer night, embarrassed by my own behavior. But just to ease my mind, I crossed the street and I dealt with feeling foolish. But just then he crossed the street too. That was my sign. Don't come any closer to me, I said loudly without even meaning to. It just came out of me. It surprised me how complete it was. How it was exactly what I felt and exactly what I wanted most in the world at that very moment. Don't come any closer to me. How it was a command, not a request. Don't. I never heard myself sound so sure of anything before in my life, honestly. My voice was the first real sound I'd heard in several minutes, and I was surprised at how loud it felt, breaking the tension and finally starting this, whatever this was. He looked like it startled him, too. After a moment of pause, he said, "Don't be scared," and he just kept walking right towards me. "I'm not scared," I said. "I just don't want you near me." We stood there for a moment at an impasse, looking at each other intently. "Please," he said. "I got mugged. Someone stole my wallet and my phone. I don't have any money, and I need to call someone to come get me. There's a gas station 1 block over, man, on that avenue right there." I pointed to the right of us. "I'm sure they have a phone for you. I'm not from here, and I had too much to drink, and I don't want to get lost," he said. I surprised myself with all the red flags I noticed as soon as they went up. His clear and sober-sounding speech, his local-sounding accent, the fact that I was the first to speak, the one to initiate this dialogue when if he was the one who needed help, you'd think he would have said something first. The weirdness of someone going out alone and getting drunk on their own in a strange city instead of hanging out with friends or drinking moderately or anything like that. I know it's not impossible. I've traveled alone myself and enjoyed my own company in plenty of bars, but it all just seemed like a bunch of relatively less than common stuff. And all taken together, it made me wary. He continued on. "Will you walk to the gas station with me, or maybe I could just borrow your phone?" "No," I said. "You should turn right and walk until you come to the next intersection. You'll be at a very busy road with the gas station on your left-hand side. Please, could you just help me?" he said. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just need help." He started walking again towards me, slow like how you would approach a cat. "Seriously, what's wrong with you? I just need your help." At that point, I thought of my Leatherman and my flick knife, both of which I used regularly for work, both of which were buried somewhere in the bottom of my hellishly messy purse. My fingers twitched with longing, but I didn't want to be distracted, so I didn't start fumbling around for them. "I told you," I said, raising my voice. "Don't come closer to me." I stepped backwards and hated myself for doing it. It felt like sort of mini surrender. And that's when he took another step forward. "I won't hurt you," he said. I began crossing the empty street again, walking backwards at first just to keep my eyes on him. And I said, "I'll scream. There's a cop who's stationed on a bike 3 blocks away. He's there every night and he'll hear me. He'll be here in seconds. You really should turn right at this corner and we'll take you right to that gas station." "If you say so," he said. And I felt the distinct and chilling question within myself of whether in his ambiguity he was referring to the location of the gas station or the location of the police officer. He didn't start walking. I stood there on the other side of the street, cautious of taking my eyes off him, but he didn't start walking. I did. I walked until we were directly across the street from each other, and then I kept going. I glanced at him over my shoulder after a few steps, and he was still there, just watching me, clearly going nowhere. I walked a few more steps and glanced over at him again, still standing there. That's when I picked up the pace and went a ways further. Looked back, and this time he was completely gone. He had to have moved quickly, a lot quicker than he'd been moving before when he was just walking towards me, in order to reach that intersection and turn right toward the gas station in just a few moments. I couldn't stop wondering, though, where else could he have gone, moving that quickly without me watching? I didn't think he could have crossed the whole street and managed to hide somewhere, at least not without me hearing. I glanced at the sidewalk across from me. It was lined with trees and bushes. There were massive gardens all along it, all kind of yards and stuff like that. There were almost no street lights and so many shadows. He really could be anywhere. I thought about turning down a side street and heading towards the main drag where all the bars and restaurants were. I glanced down one as I passed. No street lights at all, just sleepy, silent buildings, all empty for the night, and the bright lights of the next avenue seemed impossibly far away. I kept going straight, and I tried to tell myself to calm the fuck down. He was just someone out walking alone, just like I was nothing more. I even managed to work up some guilt over not doing more to help him. I like to think of myself as a good person, and it bothered me that I'd been so rude to someone who really might have needed help. But at the same time, I just couldn't quite make myself relax about it. I wanted to run, but I also desperately didn't want to run. Maybe it's just a leftover superstition from childhood. But somehow I felt that a chase never truly begins until you start running. So I walked quickly. I looked back. I saw shadows. So many of them. I walked quicker. I looked back again. Still nothing but shadows. I willed myself to calm down, but I just couldn't make it happen. Finally, I hit the block where the cop on the bicycle was always waiting behind a few trees. With that grove in sight, that's when I broke into a run. That chase was finally on, if it ever would be. I sprinted, and then, as my panic grew, I pushed even faster down that final block. The cop heard me running his way before he really saw me. "Miss, are you okay?" he asked as I approached, still largely shrouded by the shadows of the trees behind him. "Yeah," I replied, feeling almost silly immediately. "I'm fine. Sorry. I got scared." I smiled an apology and began to make fun of myself the way we so often do when we feel stupid. But the cop was already looking behind me over my shoulder. "Sir," he called loudly, finally coming out from behind the trees to fully be seen. "Is there something I can help you with?" "No, thanks," I heard a voice say. I turned around, and there was the man, no more than 30 feet behind me, just staring right through me. I could only think that he'd follow me after all, slinking along in the shadows. Then he walked when I walked, and eventually he ran when I ran, even though full-on running meant abandoning his cover. "Do you know him?" the cop asked. "No," I said quietly. He told me he got mugged and he wanted me to help him, but I was scared, so I didn't help him. Even in that moment, I felt just a twinge of guilt. I waited for the man to come closer to tell the cop that he'd been mugged, that he needed a phone to prove that I was the horrible person in the situation, not him. But he said nothing. He waved, then turned around and started walking the other way. He didn't look back. I waited with the police officer, and we watched him walk for several minutes, and then I asked the cop to escort me to my home a block away. When he got to my front door, the cop asked me if I was okay or if I wanted to make a formal statement. I couldn't really think of anything that I would even say. I was out walking alone, and I saw another person out walking alone, and I yelled at him when he asked me for help. Then he followed me. All I really know is that he was blonde. In addition to that sounding wild in my own head, I was a bit shocked and stunned. So I just said no. For helping me get home safely, I went inside and used my flashlight to get to bed, too scared to turn on any of the lights in my house, out of fear that they would render me visible from the street. It wasn't until I was already in bed, sweltering in my unair-conditioned bedroom, because I couldn't bear to open the windows, that I found myself wondering if I hadn't run. If he hadn't been forced to run and thus abandoned the silent but uneven cover of the shadows and the trees, would the police officer have seen him at all? Or would he have remained hidden, watching me, following me right up to my doorstep? And if so, what then? I grew up in a small town in the UK with my single mom and sister. Pretty normal childhood, all things considered. I didn't know much about my dad growing up, just what my mom had told me, which wasn't a lot beyond the fact that he wasn't someone that we wanted in our lives. I think I met him for the first time when I was about 10. Things are a bit hazy now, but I think he and my mom had started seeing each other again for a short time. It was rocky from the start. He'd show up, be around for a bit, then disappear once again. This kind of on and off thing kept happening until I was about 15. That's when he started getting aggressive with my mom, and she finally cut him off for good. At this point, I still didn't know the full story about him. Turns out when she was pregnant with me, my dad used to beat her within an inch of her life, to the point where she said that it was a miracle that I was even born. She kept a lot of that from me for a long, long time. Well, one afternoon, not long after she stopped seeing him, he came to our front door. When my mom wouldn't let him in, he went ballistic. He tried to kick it in, yelling that he was going to burn the house down and kill all of us inside. I was home watching the whole thing unfold. I don't think I'll ever forget seeing him outside, making a throat-slitting gesture right at my window. The police ended up coming out that day and arresting him. Once he got hauled off, my mom filed for a restraining order. We didn't hear from him again after that, at least not for a while. About 3 years after he showed up at the house, I think that would have made it 2013, a postcard showed up, just my name and a phone number on it. No message, but I knew immediately that it was from him. His handwriting was messy, and I recognized it right away. It had been years since we heard anything, and now, out of nowhere, he was trying to make contact again. I did what any sane person would do. I ignored it. Well, a few months later, in July of 2013, that's when the police showed up at our house. We didn't know what it was about initially, and we were surprised when they started asking questions about my grandmother, my father's mom. Apparently, she had been missing for a while now. She liked to travel a lot, so no one thought much of it at first. But when no one had heard from her in 3 months, that's when family started to get concerned. The last person who had seen her, my dad. Around the time she vanished, there was a body found about a mile away from where she was last seen. The remains were in bad shape, but a family member of ours was able to ID her based on a facial reconstruction. I'm still amazed at how much that recreation looked just like her. My dad quickly became the main suspect, and police arrested him on suspicion of murder. And that's when all of the truly horrible details started to trickle out. Apparently, he and my grandmother had gotten into an argument, and he took her life. But he didn't stop there. He dismembered her and buried her in a shallow grave right down the road. One of the most horrifying things that the police told to us was that she may have still been alive when he started cutting her up. That's something that I still can't wrap my head around. Even with all the police had against him, he denied everything at first. When out of nowhere, he eventually came clean and gave a reason that was somehow even more disturbing than the act itself. He told the authorities that he thought that his mother was a reptile wearing human skin. He wanted to cut her open to prove it. That's what he said. That was his explanation. He ended up being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. After a psychiatric evaluation, they charged him with murder, but what he was ultimately convicted of was manslaughter, a crime that would carry much less time in prison than a murder sentence. The verdict was delivered in 2014, and he was sentenced to 18 years, although only 9 of those were to be served behind bars. The rest of the time would be under supervised release. And that's about what happened. He got out in 2022. It's now been 3 years. I'm an adult now, with my own life, living several countries away. Although he's supposedly not allowed to leave the country under the terms of his release. I'd be lying if I said that made me feel any safer. This is someone who threatened to kill us, who once stood outside of our house miming, slitting our throats. Someone who had callously murdered and mutilated his own mother. And now he's just out there walking around free. I think about that postcard a lot. It showed up right around the time that he killed her. And I still don't know what to make of it. Why he sent it, what it even meant. All I know is that someone with a history of violence like that shouldn't have been let out of prison so easily. In my heart, I feel like the justice system completely failed here. And it scares the hell out of me knowing that he's still out there somewhere. And I know if you're hearing this, it's easy to think, no way this is real. I get it. That's a normal reaction when you hear something this messed up online. But I promise you, it's 100% true. If you look up the Castorin Hill murder, you'll find all the details. The man who did it, that's my father.